Okay, says we're live.
Okay, good.
We're here, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Dr. Louise. It's so good to see you. So happy to have you here. We are live. If you're out there, if you can see us, please give us a thumbs up. Give us an emoji. Let us know you can see us. Give us a wave. Give us a like. Give us a comment. My name is Tim Westbrook. I am the host of I Love Being Sober. Really happy to be here. Really happy to be sober and alive and doing okay. And I'm really grateful to have Dr. Louise Stanger here with me today. And Dr. Louise Stanger is a preeminent interventionist and thought leader in the behavioral health and addiction treatments industry. She has received many distinguished awards and performed thousands of family interventions in the U.S. and abroad. Gives presentations around the country on various topics related to mental health and addiction, process disorders, and chronic pain, and has received prestigious awards from her fellow industry colleagues for her dedication to intervention and recovery. Harvard McLean Hospital, an affiliate of Harvard University, and DB Resources honored her as Interventionist of the Year. Her work has been featured in the Huffington Post, Thrive Global, Recovery Campus, Journal of Alcohol Studies, Recovery View, Sober Way, Sober World, and more. Her book, Falling Up, a memoir of renewal, in which Dr. Stanger recounts her travails growing up in a substance abuse family and forging her unique path, is available on Amazon. And Learn to Thrive, an intervention guidebook, is available on her website as well. And then she has a new book that's going to be coming out, the Definitive Guide to Addiction Interventions.
That's already out. That's a textbook, and I'm excited to share if I can interrupt. But University of Wisconsin, this School of Continuing Education has just contracted with me to develop the first university-based 12-week course, which could be done in perpetuity, on invitations to change, which is totally based on that textbook. But I do have another surprise book coming out, which I'll keep for later. That's going to be out in November. But I'm so excited about having a university-based 12-week course that's going to get, have CIP, everything else with it.
Awesome. So you've been busy writing.
In COVID-19, I have been busy writing my third book. And wow. It's really, I think the title is, I'm not positive because they're still doing that. It's in developmental editorial stage right now. But right now the working title is Addiction in the Family. And it's an easy guidebook. It's 6 chapters, and it's something that I wish I had when I learned that I lived in a family that was very strange. I didn't quite understand what was going on. Right. And it's got self-help in it. So every chapter, there's something you can do to self-help. Obviously, the last chapter is being of service, which is the highest level we can be. But that'll be out, I think, in November. That's what they tell me.
Okay. Awesome. Well, looking forward to it. You've also been busy shopping for new glasses.
Yes, these are my new glasses, so we can take a vote. They're sort of wild. And, in COVID-19, I have been spending more and more time writing on Zoom and everything. And I thought, what kind of fun thing can we add for humor, because everybody's so serious, and what we can do. So these are the first time I've ever worn these publicly. So I am virginal with my big blue specs, which, by the way, since we're talking about addiction, these are called Addiction. I don't know how.
Wow, how fitting.
I know.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that you feel comfortable wearing those shades in front of me. You first showed up with those glasses on, and I was like, oh, okay, awesome. This is let's spice it up with some blue glasses. So today the topics are going to be how to get off the addiction roller coaster. which is something that you wanted to talk about. We're going to talk about the trauma bubble. What is a trauma bubble? And are people living in a trauma bubble right now? And we've got the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact on emotions and the impact on people and the impact on families. We're going to talk about what to do when a loved one is in trouble. As you said, you are an interventionist. And then also we're going to talk about how to find the best treatment for your loved one, because not all treatment centers are alike.
Yes. So, but first of all, I just want to thank you, Tim. You reminded me, we first met many years ago at the Del Corno Hotel thing when we were sparkling, spanking, sort of new and exciting. And what an honor to be with you today, to see how vast you have grown and to be such a service to offer a podcast such as this for people to access at any time. I mean, that's really doing good. So I'm just so honored to be part of it and to watch you on your journey as you continue to help those in need.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And, yeah, I do remember it was several years ago. It was probably 2015. I had one house. I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, because owning one sober living home, it doesn't really, it doesn't pay the bills. Because at that time, I was still in school. I think I was probably getting my doing my practicum at PCS in Old Town Scottsdale. I was the house manager. I was doing admissions. I was driving for Uber on the side to make enough money to pay my bills. And I was like, I got to figure out how to like make this thing work and make enough money to live. And I remember, so I ended up, and we were discussing potentially opening up an IOP or a treatment center. And what I decided to do was continue on the sober living path. And now I have homes in Scottsdale, Phoenix, and in Tucson. And we also offer recovery coaching. So thanks for being part of my journey. And thanks for being there for me when I was just getting started out.
Oh my goodness. Well, congratulations to you. And I know that all those people that you serve are so enriched by the services that you offer. And, you forget that I came into the behavioral healthcare treatment field after having a pretty distinguished career in academia. And it was when I was at the University of San Diego, and I had this big $1.5 million grant on a parent-based intervention to reduce high-risk problematic drinking. And I'd always done interventions on the side, which we can, if you want to know how I learned about them and what inspired me. But I really didn't fit in well at the University of San Diego. It was sort of these glasses, a round hole in a square peg, although I never would have worn these on that campus. And at the time, it just wasn't working. I was always very collaborative. My grant was one of the best in the country. It was an NIAAA grant, but I was invited to do an intervention by a 90-year-old gentleman who really was concerned about his 63-year-old daughter. And it took forever to do this. He needed to get through Thanksgiving. He needed to get through Christmas. And we just handheld along the way, and his grandchildren and his other daughter. And finally, the day after Christmas, we did this intervention. And of course, she said no right away and got on a train. And then 5 days later, went to treatment. But at that time, I wasn't really happy, and I don't think it was a gift. It was, how do you think outside of the box? And I had been doing interventions forever on the side. And so I said goodbye to the university, evaluated the detox center at Sharp Mesa Vista, and developed my company, which I thought would be great, called AAI, because it would be first in the yellow pages. Okay? Brilliant. I know. And then along the way, I was always a good presenter, or at least a good teacher, so to speak. And Ed and Marianne Spatola from Newfound Life invited me to speak at one of the first conferences in Florida. And from there, I talked about family. And for some reason, thank you, Jordan Young, he sent me this plaque. And I had been in a referee journal world, not a pay-for-play world, which at the time sometimes it was. And I got fan favorite speaker. And that's really how I got involved in the behavioral healthcare field.
Okay. Okay. So let's, where did you grow up?
So my accent is not from New York. It's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was
Okay.
born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and lived there. My first degree comes from Pitt, University of Pittsburgh. My second from San Diego State. My third one from University of San Diego, where I got my doctoral degree.
Okay. So you came out west and you decided to stay.
Yeah, I came out west with my first husband, who is deceased. He went to Pitt Dental, and he was a dentist. And at that time, the way he went into the service, and he was stationed in San Diego, and that was the height of Vietnam. And so very different. But I mean, if you wanted to know about my life, my book, Following Up, a Memoir of Renewal, documents that I grew up in a household full of substance use, mental health, suicide, and 5 sudden deaths. And yet really talented. And my interest in alcohol and other drugs came from the fact that it took me a long time to figure out we were just strange, but I grew up in a family that alcohol was almost its middle name, along with success. And when I was asked to create the first graduate seminar in substance abuse, when the law changed, and at that time, that was at San Diego State. And at that time, just to give you a history lesson, because I'm old, so we need a history lesson, is Hazleton was sort of kingpin, and Betty Ford was just starting, and San Diego was on the way to the desert. And so we would bring in guest lecturers. And I don't know why in this world that any interventionist who teaches intervention or invitations to change, or however you want to call it, does not acknowledge 2 people. One is Vern Johnson, who, of course, wrote I'll Quit Tomorrow, who's the granddaddy of intervention, but his best friend. So into my classroom came one day this tall, stately, eloquently spoken gentleman, and his name was Frank Picard. And Dr. Picard was then the head of Springbrook, which was an independent treatment center in Oregon. He was best friends with Vern Johnson, but they had a little argument. So he wrote a book called Family Intervention, which you can still get. And when he spoke, my heart stopped. I have no idea what my students were doing, to be honest with you. He described my family to a T. And I'm a good adult child of an alcoholic. I love drama and I love crisis. I am great in both of those. And so he is the one that mentored me and taught me how to do interventions, but I also was a social worker. So good systems theory, family theory, Minuchin, Satir. And that's really what I learned.
So let's back up for a minute. Okay, so you said now how many siblings did you have?
I was an only child. My mother had 6 miscarriages.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I had a stepbrother after my real father committed suicide. My mother remarried.
Wow.
He was much older than me.
So what were some of the major events? Because you said alcoholism, substance use, suicide, sudden death.
So perhaps the first major event was when I was 7. There was a lot of hush. My uncles were very famous judges and lawyers, and they always said I had bad table manners. And I was eating dinner there, and I knew my father was ill, but I didn't know what was ill. And there was a ring, and my mother left. And later that night, she came. I had to stay at my grandmother's house, my uncle's house. And she came, and she said, and her breath smelled really funny. It was alcohol, but I just knew her breath. Another man, and she told me my father was in heaven. And in those days, you weren't allowed to go to the funeral or anything. So I'm going to fast forward, and it was really sad because he was my hero.
Right.
And I confabulated, made up a story that really, my father was Superman, and he was taken out by kryptonite. And I knew that's what happened. That's what happened to him. Except I was in third grade. They made me go back to school. I really didn't want to go to school. And I was on the playground, and little Ruthie Ann with freckles, red hair, and pigtails came skipping up to me. And she said, "Do you know how your father died?" Well, I wasn't going to tell her that he was Superman. And I said, "Of course I know how." And then in a breath, a hint of a moment, she said, he hung himself with a tie. And that's how I learned. And my mother at that time, I also coined a word later on about being emotionally non-intentionally unavailable. I was lucky enough to be sent away to camp, and a wonderful social worker owned the camp. And I went to that camp from the time I was 8 till the time I was 16. And it wasn't until later that I got to learn that he followed in his mother and father's footsteps, and they had killed themselves when they were 48. So that's probably my first experience. My second experience would be I had my third child was a son. I mean, I don't want to look, life is really good for me, but my third child died of SIDS death, sudden infant death syndrome.
Okay.
Where you put it, and the only boy. And that had long-reaching effects on everybody. And then my mother died suddenly, my father died suddenly, my husband died suddenly. So I didn't have a chance to experience death. I'm really good with sudden death. That's why I got to work with the New York Fire Department, the Widows of 9/11.
Right.
As I had done research in that arena. The only person in the country. Wow. But and so what I know is no matter what the hiccups are, no matter what has happened, you can always rise to your best possible self. One does not have to stay in trauma lane. One does not have to stay feeling pity or resentment or guilt.
Well, it's being a victim versus being responsible, right? I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not. It sucks that it happened, but it's like, okay, it happened. Now, things happen to everybody.
Yeah.
Like, we all have things that happen to us. It's how do I get past it, work through the trauma, and come out the other side and continue living my life and learn from my experiences.
And that takes a lot of grief work, a lot of being able to, and knowing that you get to choose your story, you get to rewrite your story. So I'm always with people helping them rewrite their stories. Not lying, but and we deal with people who are vulnerable, whether they're family or they're the identified loved one who is experiencing substance use or mental health disorder. They all have violated their value stances. They all have done something they're not really proud of. And when we talk about recovery, it's really the opportunity to take a look, to make amends for those things that we might have done that were really against our value system, that might have harmed other people, and to begin to rewrite our story so that we can really enjoy a rich life and be of service to others.
So you were you were on staff at University of San Diego, and you said that, and how long were you there?
Well, University of San Diego was only 2004 to 2008 because and San Diego State was from the time off and on, from the time I was 22, I was invited to teach there off and on till 2004. Very long time. And I held a lot of what we call public health harm reduction grants, which means they were like cops in shops. They were taking a look at more like seatbelts. So helping to reduce risk for college-age students and their families. I left because I wanted to get a large grant on a parent-based intervention to reduce high-risk problematic drinking, which you could only get at a private four-year college. And USD at the time had a higher per capita drinking rate than San Diego State, which was known as the #1 party school in the country. but it's small, and so you could work with parents and everything.
Right. Okay. So how did you end up working in the field of addiction? Because you ended up leaving. I think you started telling
Well,
the
I
story.
always was doing interventions on the side from the time in the early 80s is
Mhm.
when the first graduate seminar was developed. By law, you had to have one. Even Kevin McCauley gave his first talk in
Okay.
my classroom on prevention unwoven. He was a PhD public health student who
Uh-huh.
said, "Can I talk?" And he was in my class. So that,
Kevin McCauley, senior fellows at the Meadows. Okay. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And so I had always done, because remember, I had learned how to do interventions from one of the founders of intervention. And and he said you had to do more family oriented. I was a social worker. I knew how to do family therapy. And in the beginning, I didn't like the surprise. I really felt so uncomfortable. Like, hi, guess who's here? You know, the lady with the strange glasses. No. And then the other thing is, I didn't like doing them alone. I didn't think that was a good service. I felt that if you had a team, you could offer better service, because you never know. And my teammate is always someone who's in recovery, always someone who can really join up with the person that's the identified loved one. And I'm more or less like the family whisperer, but also like even for escorting, safe escort to treatment, someone has to stay behind because you just had this big event with the family or the attorneys or the estate attorneys, whatever it is. You need to stay behind and try and process, and then another person needs to help safe passage to the treatment center. So the first person, and I'm sure you knew who he was, that I really teamed with, and unfortunately he died 2 years ago, is Sean Fertel.
Okay.
And Sean owned, Sean went on to own his own treatment centers um, in in San Diego. He was a great guy. I'm very talkative. He was very soft spoken, to the point, and it was a really good match. And I've had the opportunity to team with some outstanding people. Jeff Merrick and I used to do a lot of teaming together. He's a fabulous attorney. Currently, probably Shane Anderson, who, whether you know or not, is a certified intervention professionalist. He's been a recovery coach. He and I have been doing a lot of work together. I don't believe that you do interventions alone. And so I'm very clear on that you do it as a team.
Yeah.
And because you get a better result. And also, I'm not the kind that does high here today, gone tomorrow. I work with high acuity families. If I'm not the right person, I'm going to refer to maybe another team member I have. If I'm not the right person, or I'll refer out to someone else who would be, because I like to make systemic change. So I want a 90-day engagement, or 60 days, the shortest I'll do with any family.
Right.
It's just not worth my energy.
Well, there's not enough time. It's like somebody has been drinking and using and in their addiction for their entire lives, typically. And so to think that it can be unwound, like it's not, and I know a lot of people, they see the show Intervention, and they see the intervention and they don't realize that they think that that's just like that's the intervention, is the actual sit down, the actual meeting, and the actual taking them to treatment. But really there's a lot of work that goes into it leading up to the intervention, and then there's let's get them to treatment, and then there's a lot of work and there's a lot of work after treatment, which speaks to just the length of engagement, the length of support, the length of accountability, which the doctors, dentists, and airline pilots are monitored for 5 years
Yes.
once they get in trouble for drug related or alcohol related issues. They're monitored for 5 years and their success rate is 86%. You compare that to the average person that goes to treatment and gets sober, less than 10% of them are able to stay sober for a year. So it's more support, more accountability, a longer period of engagement, always 10 out of 10 times is going to yield better results.
We wholeheartedly agree. And the other thing I agree on is like nothing changes till everything changes. And if you've got someone, that a family, that family also has to learn new skills and strategies. Otherwise, you cannot send someone back from treatment and drop them in a system that unconsciously realigns and identifies that person is still the problem, because everybody's role shifts and everybody has to learn new ways of being. So I love, the fact that you're engaged in such a vital part of recovery, because people need to learn life skills. They need to learn how to function in this world. And change, we know, evidence-based, it takes 90 days to begin to change a behavior, to develop a new habit.
Right.
So it's sort of erroneous to think that a 30-day spin around the mountain is going to do anything.
Right.
And the same thing with family.
Yeah. 90 days to begin to change, right? I want to point that out. 90 days to begin to change, even though the person in recovery getting clean and sober might feel amazing after 90 days. That's still just the beginning. Okay, let's go back to a family disease. Is addiction a family disease?
I think it is. I think if you look at, and by disease, I mean it's progressive, chronic, and left untreated fatal. And I love the September 19th, 2020, is it new definition of addiction by ASAM. We know that with addiction, it is a brain disease. Our brain sort of gets hijacked and we attach to different things. So we have these things called neurotags: people, places, things, thoughts, feelings, and actions. And we learn how to respond in certain ways. And family members also respond in certain ways. Oh, they're calling work, bailing someone out, they're crying, they're lecturing, they're nagging, they're not remembering when their wallet is empty or their charge card is missing. And so recovery means that we have to go beneath our brain, which is no longer our friend. It's just not our friend. And we have to, in the program, they'll talk about suit up and showing up. We have to begin to change our behaviors, change our thoughts, and change our actions. We also, for family members, we have to learn how to respond, not react. And we have to begin to also look at the identified loved one in a new light. They're a person who experiences a substance use or mental health disorder. I do not call anybody alcoholic or addict. Those are terms that one uses in a 12-step group and are self-identifiers. Because what I know is that person, that loved one of yours, is so much more than that. They're a person, they're a son, maybe they were a father, maybe they were a mother, maybe they were an artist, a tennis player. I don't know what they were, but there's so much more than that. You wouldn't call someone who is diabetic or heart disease, hi, you're a heart disease, you're a diabetic. That doesn't totally define you. And neither does alcoholic or addict, but if someone who experiences substance use disorder does, because you're so much more.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a whole other topic, which it's like, you've got Tommy Rosen who says I'm a person in long-term recovery.
Yeah.
And most people, if they were to go to a 12-step meeting and say, hi, my name's Tim, I'm in
But I think you should do that.
Long-term recovery.
I'm saying in 12-step recovery, you should do that.
Yeah, right.
I'm saying I'm a clinician. So as a clinician, or as an interventionist, I'm going to say, you have someone who experiences a substance use or mental health disorder or chronic pain. I'm not going to say, hi, when you go to 12-step, which I think is great, or any other support group, you're going to self-identify yourself as such.
Right.
But what I have to teach families is that your loved one is so much more than that. Because oftentimes the word addict, alcoholic carries the stigma, no good. I think that if there's an article I wrote a long time ago, which is based on what the Secretary of Health recommended. It's called Words, Words, Words. You can access it off my website, or you can access it off of Huffington. There's also the Secretary of State will talk about that. So no one's discrediting. It's just a matter of, how do I teach the general world that you're more than just an alcoholic addict? Because if you have a negative connotation attached with that, you're not going to see the goodness.
Right. Well, and part of it is your subconscious thinking, in my opinion, anyways. It's like, if you continue to say I'm an alcoholic, if you continue to say I'm a drug addict, then, it's like thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, that's interesting. So earlier you said a person in recovery needs to change their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Which comes first?
I think first is you suit up and you show up, just like they say in the program.
Right.
Because my actions are what I'm going to have to do first, because my thinking is sort of stinking, so to speak. And so, I'm going to suit up, I'm going to follow, I'm going to learn how to reframe. I'm going to learn how to, maybe I'm going to have some CBT, I'm going to have some homework assignments, and I'm going to learn how to rethink. With families, oftentimes I have to teach them that their loved one's not going to die or scream at them or hate them forever if they invite them to change. That's always the fear. I can't do this, I don't know how to love them without giving them unlimited funds, or I don't know how to love them with that by saying no. So or saying yes that means no. They're scared, and they've been doing the same thing over and over again, that they don't know that they won't get a different result. So I think changing action first, teaching people how to respond and not react, which is languaging, letting someone know in non-judgmental terms your concerns. Hey, I love you and I care about you. And I'm always going to love and care about you. But yesterday, when you didn't remember where you were, and I can show you this video of you being passed out on the couch, I felt scared and baffled. I don't know what all the problems are. I just know that you need to get help.
Louise, I can only see like half of your face.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You could move to your right. Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm like talking to half of your face.
Oh, I don't know how that happens. Down below, I can see all of you, and then okay, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. No problem. Okay, so you're talking about changing actions first, and I think that speaks to like my best thinking got me where I am today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's accepting that, and then it's taking suggestions, and that's why we go to therapy, that's why we go to treatment, that's why we get a sponsor, that's why we spend our time with other people that are in recovery, that have been in recovery longer than me, or sometimes not in recovery longer than me. I know that when Tim is listening to Tim, like it's not good. Tim needs to listen to somebody else besides Tim.
Yes, I agree.
And that seems to work a lot better than when Tim is just listening to Tim. So a lot of times families, they just don't know what to do. And I mean, I have lots of families that I work with. I mean, I've got a couple of families that I'm working with right now. They just don't know what to do. And my suggestion a lot of times is like, well, you've got to it's just as important, because a lot of times families, they think, well, it's not my problem. I don't have any problems. I'm not the person, or maybe I do have problems, but my problems aren't that. They're not really they're not the reason why my mom or my dad or my son or my daughter is actively drinking and using. So they kind of, my suggestion is for them to get into treatment, go to Al-Anon, and work on themselves because that will help them better support not only themselves, but also their loved one. And I think a lot of times my suggestions are put by the wayside, and I just don't know how to. What's your experience with that?
So when a family calls me, their heart is breaking. They've reached some sort of tipping point. And a lot of times they do see it's not them, it's their loved one. And, you know, you have to, in the same way you, oops, sorry about that, open the honeycomb of denial for a loved one, you have to open the honeycomb of denial for the family. And that is, how's this really been working for you? You know, recently, oh, I'm so sorry. There must be someone here because we're moving. Teddy, Coco, hold on a minute. Alex, you cannot be in here working. Go, come here. Come here. In there. Sorry. We're in the midst of moving, so I'm really sorry about that. So, for example, a family will tell me they're scared and they're afraid and they think they've done everything. Well, I gave them this, I gave them that. And you have to say, how's that really working? And teach them what is mental health, what is addiction, and also honor them because they cared about their loved one. And I always give families no fault insurance. I say, you've done the best that you can do. You really have, with the resources you have. And I know that because I've been there. But now let's just take a look and see what we might learn how to do differently and open up their honeycomb. You know, recently I was working with a family and I have to change it for HIPAA, but their loved one had 3 DUIs. The last one, a felony DUI. The car flipped over and there were young children in it. And this problem has been going on since the loved one was maybe 16, 15, and all of a sudden they're like going, we need to do something about it. Now, these are good people, but the tears and the culture, like, if I do something, they will hate me forever. And I go, do they like you now? Do they talk to you? You know, helping them understand that really intervening or asking for help is an act of courage. It's true love. And sometimes when we love our families, we're killing them softly. To look the other way, to always bail out. You know, one of the hardest things, and I'm sure you have that with families, is the phone. The phone, right? As far as I know, this is a direct dial to a drug dealer, right?
Right.
How many families spend so much time telling you that they can track their loved one with the phone? And then you ask them, how many times did your loved one call you? Oh, only when they need money. Oh, so you're actually paying for the drug dealer, you know? You have to gently go in. And you have to, in 7 seconds, someone decides if they like you or not. Words, funny glasses, it doesn't really matter. That's evidence-based. So you have to join up with that person, give empathy, and understand that they really believe they're doing the best they can, that they love that person. And they've yelled, they've nagged, they've screamed, they pleaded, they threw them out, they put them back in. You know, it's very inconsistent. And so you have to give them hope. I think I have one article that I always send out. It's called From Fear to Hope. There's always hope. There's always a solution. Sometimes you'll join in and not. The other day I had another phone call. I don't think the mother is willing to join into a solution. She has a super, super bright guy. He's in a psychotic break. She denied any SA, but master's degree. He's walking around the streets somewhere. And she said, I won't say. She said that an organization said that intervention won't work. And I said, that's not true. But I can't tell you it will work 100%. I can guarantee you'll change. You'll learn.
He guaranteed that what would work? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I can guarantee that you will change. I guarantee that families will change if they choose to.
Right, right. And what advice do you have for a family out there that, like, for example, and I can think off the top of my head, I've got a, a husband and a wife. They have a son that's in his 20s, and the son is not willing to go to sober living. The son is not, he's just not willing to do anything. But of course, the parents don't want to put him out on the street. And I've seen this multiple times. They're like, you know what? I'm not putting my son out on the streets. Like, I would rather him be home safe and drinking and using, as opposed to out on the streets. And I was talking with Ken Seeley about that. Ken Seeley talks about bringing the bottom up to the top, because if you continue supporting that person, they're going to slowly lose everything, as opposed to ripping the Band-Aid off to where they have to. Because it's like, if somebody's living a good life and they're supported, and everything goes away, and if they don't go to treatment, everything is gone, then they're way more likely to say, okay, my hands are up, I'm gonna get treatment. So what's your
So this might be one of the times that Ken and I totally agree. We have to bring the bottom up, because and you have to let them say, how's this really working for you? Do you have locks on your doors? Where's your money? You know, how's that hiding? And so you realize, and really getting them to understand they're softly killing their loved one, because they are. And maybe it's really getting worse for the family member, as opposed to getting worse for the loved one. Because there's a lot of people who call and say, well, I could never throw them out. And I go, well, I tell everybody that you have to look yourself in the mirror, and you have to decide. We can make 1,000 suggestions, but ultimately you have the choice of what you're willing to do or what you're not willing to do. Let's take a look at what you've been doing lately. And if it was working, you would never call me. We would never meet. Why would you call me? Why did you call me? Because your heart is hurting. And so let's take a look at what you've been doing. And is there another way? Is there another way?
Usually it's not an easy give someone direction and they do it, right? I mean, it's like we know, it's like, because there's, are you enmeshed? Are you drawing boundaries? Are you enabling? It's like, how?
So I talk about look, I talk about your house, right? We're a house, right? Your house, and you have property. Okay, this is your house. So I don't, instead of talking about boundaries, I talk about you being a house. Okay. And if you lived in your house and there was a neighbor that threw trash onto your property or cut down a tree, how would you feel about that? So tell me about your house and tell me about what's going on with your property. And do you like that, living in that sewer pit or that garbage can? Because people can relate very much to that. So when we say, what is it that's okay and what is it not okay? Because people don't know that they have been doing this for so long. They're sort of immune. It's sort of over here. The other day I was working with a family, and they're used to giving their loved one everything. And they went to treatment and they called and they said, I don't know. I want you to send, because there's some people in the treatment center, a cake from this most expensive place in LA. And they immediately, we're going to pull out and have this cake order. I go, really? Really? How's that work? Is that going to make your loved one, he's already, he's been in one treatment, I was in another treatment, you're going to run? I mean, part of it is he hasn't learned how to grow, and people will like him with or without this fancy cake. They don't even realize they're doing things like that. So sometimes you just have to teach people, really? And also I teach families 5 magic words. I know you're so excited to learn this, Tim. Okay, are you ready? They're really
I'm ready.
Oh, no, yes, really, and whatever. So, and a lot of times I'm using yes to mean no. Yes, I'm only going to support you in health and wellness. Yes, that money is no longer available to you. Yes, the car is no longer available to you. Yes, um, I'm going to be doing things differently. Really? So you're going to leave? Really? Oh, those put the responsibility of the behavior back on the identified loved one. Really, really hard for people to learn.
Mm-hmm.
They also learn how to talk in I terms, I feel, non-judgmental terms. They also learn how to respond and not react. But those are skills that have to be taught. Because just like the person with an addiction may want everything now, the family member is hypervigilant and they're used to going, no, I gotta do this now.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to hit a timeout. So, I mean, and also I know that not every family will we win, not every loved one will we get to treatment, but I do believe that more than we can do much more than not.
Right. I like that. They're softly killing them by letting them continue with their behaviors, by letting them put trash on your house, in
On
your
your house.
house.
It's your property. So do you really value your property? Do you really value yourself?
What about you? Recently, I've had several older people, and their kids are reaching out to me. So you've got older people, I'm talking, 60s, 70s, 80s,
Think
and
their kids are reaching out to you, because sometimes the kids say, oh, that's just the way she is. That's just the way he is. But, I think change is always possible. I remember helping a family who had this beautiful woman. She was in her 70s, and she liked her alcohol, especially on a golf cart. And the tipping point for them was that she um, tipped over the golf cart with her 2-year-old granddaughter in it. And that was too much, broke her arm.
okay.
And they said, and the husband said, oh, I'm just going to leave her. I don't like her anyhow, right?
Uh-huh.
And the daughter said, I'm never going to talk to her again. And I said, well, but teach me about her. And she was able to go to treatment. She was able to get the help she needed. And she was able to be that grandmother again. The same thing with that first intervention that helped me leave the university with the gentleman. His daughter got to be a grandmother, got to show up and stand up. Maybe not always for her child, but for those kids, because they found recovery.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're ever too old. I think when it comes to aging, you have to rule out early onset dementia. You have to rule out some physical kinds of issues. But please, at my age, if I ever need help, Tim, please intervene on me.
I've seen, to your point, I've seen lots of people that are 60, 70, 80 find recovery. It's never too
Yeah.
late.
It's never too late and it's never too early. It's just a matter of willing. I think it's still a matter of willingness and surrender, and the right environment and the right invitations and the right, you have to build scaffolding. What I love about what you do is you're building scaffolding. So I think that after they say recovery begins when treatment ends, and I work with families over time and, always make sure that there's a plan in place, like something like you for the identified loved one. Because I know that that's the scaffolding that needs to build, so that they can live a life well lived.
And when you have parents and they have their kids that are, 20, 30, even 40, right?
Mm.
It's much, I mean, to me, it seems a lot easier to say, "Y- you're not welcome here. and let them figure it out. You know, you can go be homeless if you want to go be homeless.
I think 40-year-old women that have young children is really hard for a parent because they're grandparents.
Huh?
And so I think there's a big, big conflict there. At least that's my experience. Because you've got to make sure that you've got these at-risk young children, maybe 4, 5, 7, 8, 13, and they're at risk. So when you say, it's a whole different thing because you got to make sure that these young people are cared for. Whether or not you have to report to family services or not becomes the question. But it's not as easy as you think when you have a 40-year-old woman, because especially if they have children, because you've got the payer or the parents worried about if they have offspring. What happens to them? So, and there's a lot of material written on how you end up, grandma's taking care of the kids. Grandmother's now raising the kids. So I think that you go in with a different lens and you're always making sure that you've got these children covered so they have the courage to do it. So even referring, if there's someone goes to treatment, to somewhere like Jerry Moe, who's the only one in the country I refer to when it comes to children and children's programs, because he's just like the best in the world. But so and sometimes that 40-year-old man lives with the parent, and they're used to like being their companion or something. And so you're asking to give up a companion. You're asking to give up this relationship that is sort of a mesh like this in exchange for one that allows for separation of life. Certainly, sometimes you have to say goodbye. I love you and I care about you. I'm only going to support your health and wellness. And certainly that means, I work a lot with estate attorneys and with trust accountants, because you've got to make sure if there's high wealth that there's some way that they don't have their trust fund, or built into their trust fund or their financial plan is a way to withhold the cash. Because otherwise they get to go and buy Maybachs and they get to rent houses in the Hamptons. I've had that happen.
Okay, so what I was we kind of veered off.
I'm sorry.
My question, so I was comparing, so really let's just say you've got a 20-year-old. It's not easier for parents, but kind of it's different for a parent to put a 20-year-old out on the street and say you're not welcome here. You've got
I don't know if it's easier, because they'll tell you that I think a lot of times parents don't like to say that their child has a substance use disorder, but they love mental illness.
Well, I want to compare it to the 60 or 70 or 80-year-old parent. So if the parent is relying on the kids, the parent is living with the kids, and the kids are saying, no, you can't live here. And it would, and I could be incorrect here, but it just seems like I'm trying to put myself in both situations. I could be wrong, but would it be easier to put my 20-year-old kid out on the streets versus my 60-year-old parent?
I don't know that either one of those are easy, Tim. It all depends on what your heartstrings say. I have many a parent of a 20-year-old say that they would never put them out on the street, that they have mental illness, they have a learning disability, they could not function on their own, and they're afraid they'll never talk to them again, or they'll never see him again. And I have older adults that say, I don't know what's wrong. I think an older adult would be more willing to do an eval if they're open, because it's a more natural way in. If you have someone who's 60 or 65 and you go, hey, maybe they need a really good assessment. And so maybe the first step in treatment is getting a good 10 to 12 day assessment, and then we'll go from there. It's an easier way to join up. If they need to go to medical detox, then it's still an easier way, because they're helping them. But you're not going to necessarily put your granddad out on the street without trying to first get an assessment,
Right.
If you're able to do that. But that 20-year-old, I've had many a parent, or maybe I'm just not our team is not sometimes talented enough, because there's a lot of resistance to giving up that 20-year-old, or taking them out of that apartment, or stopping paying for that apartment, which is a drug den, where that the deliveries, because they can see the deliveries, and like when they have charge cards, that all the deliveries are for pot or alcohol or whatever, and you go like, how much is that? You're afraid to cut them off, because they're afraid they're never going to talk to them again. And then I think you have to go back into their history, where they somehow or other in their family history had something happen where a loved one just cut them off completely. So I think it's dependent on the situation. It's also dependent on family history.
Right. Let's talk about the trauma bubble.
So
what is it? What is a trauma bubble?
Well, I think that right now, we're living in a trauma bubble. Well, trauma, as we know, is both subjective and objective. Subjective means somehow or other I was told I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I'm not bright enough. Somehow or other the message got to me that, I wasn't okay. Trauma can also mean that I attach something to an event. So I'm walking down the street, and you saw my crazy dogs. They're nice, really sweet little golden doodles. All they want to do is jump up and kiss you. They don't want to bite you. But say we were walking down the street, and all of a sudden there was this, and I was a little kid, and that's the first thing I saw was a rah. So my brain is going to get attached to, I'm really scared, or there was a snake coming, something that was traumatic, and I'm going to now attach to all the nice doggies something. So there's also trauma that is objective. Objective is something happens to you. So I spoke earlier about myself. Obviously, my father's suicide was something objective that happened to me that I didn't really quite understand at that young age. It took me a lot of years to do it. And the fact that I had 5 sudden deaths just was sort of like, was actually traumatic, because I didn't know how to say goodbye to people. I was afraid. I had like sort of issues of, God, am I gonna get to see you again? So I had a hard time saying goodbye. And even to this day, I'll say aloha. Objective trauma is also 9/11. Obviously, Lark Young, who is head of the Childhood Adverse Study, did his first studies during 9/11. And he found that with that study, that if you had 4 or more adverse experiences, you were more likely to have what we call post-traumatic stress. So that might explain why two people could be in Vietnam at the same time. One comes away with a traumatic experience, the other one doesn't. It might be based on early childhood, et cetera, et cetera. Earthquakes, floods, windstorms. Those are natural occurrences which can devastate and leave people homeless. We saw in Louisiana, all the floods, hurricanes, really are somewhat natural disasters, and how I bounce back from that may be based on how I've handled other things, what's in my background. When I talk about collective trauma, and a lot of people are writing about it now, all of us, I don't care where you are, who you are, or what part of the world you're in, we are all somehow or other in this COVID-19 collective bubble. You can't see it. You can't hear it. You don't know where it's coming. And yet it's here. I remember clearly before March 13th, I was so excited. I was speaking almost every week across the country. And my last speaking engagement, before I could no longer go on any more speaking engagements, was for Providence Medical Center up in Washington. And I was speaking to 300 physicians, and I was really excited. And I was talking about how I met trauma at age 7. Or talking about trauma, a couple of different topics. I also talked about chronic pain. And I was feeling really good, because these are all docs, and that's a whole different kind of audience to talk to. And I was getting ready to fly back home to go somewhere else to speak to go to Surf Lodge to speak and do a workshop. I was so excited. And there were rumblings at this conference. It was Providence Medical Center. I didn't know them from, I really didn't know much about them, but they kept talking. The docs kept talking about, we're getting the rooms ready. And I went, what are they getting the rooms ready for? There was an airplane coming. It was coming in from China, and we needed to quarantine these people. That is the first place that people were quarantined with COVID-19. COVID-19 was no part of my vocabulary nor of my existence than the man in the moon. It was some inconvenience that they were talking about that had nothing to do with me. I mean, honestly. Then I came home, and then I was ready, and I think AL called me and said, we're not going to CERC. And I was so disappointed. I was going to teach family mapping. And we're not going anywhere, because my children called me and said, you're not leaving. There's COVID. And I go, what the hell is COVID? My denial meter was up. This couldn't be happening to us. This is merely an inconvenience. And from March 13th on, I never left again. And I get to do things like this today. And the rest of the world, we just stopped and we said, what is this? And then, it's something that we see people we know that have gotten ill. Some have gotten better. Everybody knows someone that might have been very badly harmed. We can't control it. We sit with hand wash on our desks. We have, oh my God, masks where we go everywhere. But it's significantly changed our lives. And so, and I think that it is somewhat traumatic, because every time we think we're going to be okay, we thought we were going to be okay and things were going to open. And then, a kaleidoscope of events occurred. There was a mass outcry, which of course was long overdue, of racial injustice. There were mass, there was, along with that, there was unhealthy behaviors, looting, et cetera, and everything closed again. And then we thought maybe we'd open again. Every time we think we're going to open again, lately, we're shut down. And when you walk, you go, when you can't see anyone's face, it gets scary. And then when you have to walk 6 feet away from someone else, you go, yeah, I hope you're okay. I hope you're washing. I'm glad you're wearing a mask. But if everybody knew what to do, and I think that's a collective trauma bubble, because we're all experiencing this, we're all navigating it. We all act as if the world will get better, but when? When will we get a hug again? When we get to do this again at a conference? Every conference has been canceled almost 2022.
Yeah, we're in this for the long haul.
And, I think of all the children that were high school graduates that didn't get their prom. I think of all the college freshmen who don't know whether they're starting, they're not starting, all the sports that have been canceled. I mean, massive sporting, Stanford cut 11 teams. Obviously I come from an athletic family with John having been an athletic director, but 11 sports were canceled, never to be again at Stanford. No team is starting, watching baseball without a team, watching basketball without fans, whoa, it's a different world.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was thinking about this morning, the athletes that are in their prime, and a lot of times athletes are only in their prime for 1 or 2 years, depending on which sport they're playing.
Right.
And I mean, it's just like, here it is, and there it goes.
That's right. And the kids, I have my John has a grandson that is a senior at Case Western in engineering, but he was also starting on the football team. This would have been his final year. That's it. That's gone. Kaput. Focus on, or his other grandson. And there's so many. Ben Seymour's son, Glenn Hadley's son. I mean, I know so many people whose kids are starting school, but they think they're going to do one thing and they're doing another thing. And, and maybe the babies that are born now, they're going to be COVID natives. We're COVID immigrants.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, moving on. Let's talk about. We've got a few more minutes. Let's talk about treatment centers. Not all treatment centers are alike. So, what should someone look for? So let's speak to that, and what should someone look for in a treat, and when they're looking for treatment for themselves or for a loved one.
Okay, so I have one really good article on my website, which goes from soup to nuts. So if I don't remember everything, you got to remember that not all websites are true. Okay. And it's really good to talk to someone like me who's totally independent. I'm not, or, there's a lot of people like me. So I'm not, that are independent, that aren't related to any treatment center in the country, but know what good treatment looks like. What good treatment looks like is who's your staff? What's your philosophy of treatment? What is from good to great? What's your flywheel? What do you do best? Not everybody does everything perfectly. So are you women, gender specific? Are you LGBTQ? What do you focus on? Who is your staff comprised of? An ASAM psychiatrist, someone that's board certified in addiction medicine, an ASAM physician. Do you have a robust team? And by a robust team, I mean, do you have social workers? Do you have social worker? Do you have a psychologist? Do you maybe have a marriage and family counselor? Do you have alcohol and other drug counselors? Those people that are in recovery. What kind of sort of modalities do you offer? And believe me, everybody's more than their modality. So when someone says I offer DBT, EDMR, PQRS, it's really when do you use them? How do you use them? And so what? And do you offer outdoor adventure? Do you offer life skill training? What is it? Is this particular setting geared for, 20 to 24-year-olds? Is there a place if I'm an executive and I want to use my computer, or a place where I have to have my dog that you can go to that also meets your clinical needs? But there's two variables. One is clinical and one is financial. Treatment and recovery is a grand investment. And I think that we need to be mindful of people's dollars, because we know that it's more than the 30, 45 days in inpatient treatment that's going to make a difference. So when I think about treatment, I always think about it like you do, in a span of time. But what's their philosophy of treatment? How are they accredited? That's another thing. Are they accredited by NATAP? Who are there? Are they JCO accredited? Someone, I hate the centers that say, hi, we have a golf course, and there's no golf course, or we can do, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple that I've been to, they say they have something and they don't have something. I think a multimodal approach is good for everybody, and really knowing what you do well. Chronic pain, for example, is a very, very precise way of treatment. Not all centers can deal with chronic pain. There's 7 evidence-based modalities that work, but movement is always part of that, from acupuncture to that. Being able to talk to the staff. Do they have a family program? So you're talking to someone would say, they don't have a family program, you don't want it, because you need a parallel process. Are they willing, if you're the payer, to help you get a progress-only consent form? Progress only means that you're in treatment, Tim, I'm your mom, and I know that you're doing what you're supposed to do. I don't want to know your innermost thoughts. None of my business. But I need to know that you're doing what you're supposed to do, because otherwise, what am I doing there? And we know that sometimes people don't like to give consent forms. Location, some people really like the outdoors. Some people are city dwellers. Some people really respond well auditorily. There's a lot of people that are on the spectrum. And how well do they treat someone who's on the spectrum, who has autism or learning disability? How is music integrated into treatment? Oftentimes, if we're going to do an intervention, we ask people what kind of music they like. because we know that if we are lucky enough to get them to go transport, if we play whatever music it is they really like, we're going to have a much smoother time, with that. I think you have to be creative in joining up with that person. But really, you are a buyer, and I know your hearts are hurting, but if you let someone guide you who's independent, gives you 3 referrals, and then you decide, I don't like those, but they have to know about your loved one in order to do that. You can't give a referral without knowing about the identified loved one.
Yeah, I think you pointed out really good questions. I mean, it's like there's lots of treatment centers out there. Some are good, some are bad. Specifically, it's like, what's important to me? What's important to my loved one? What location are they willing and open to traveling across the country? What part of the country do they want to be in? What do they have a dog? Do they need to bring their dog? Are they on the spectrum? Are they Are they in the LGBTQ population? There's so many things to look at. But then above that, there are other questions that you mentioned, which I think might be a little more than the average person is going to be. I don't know the best way just to say this, but not competent in the treatment area. So they're new to treatment. So asking, what modalities do you provide? What
Well,
tell me about your doctors. Tell me. Those questions I think might be a little too much. And
well,
so what is a different way?
so I think teach me about what you do. But if you look on everybody's website, come on, Tim.
Yeah.
Everybody says we do cognitive behavior, we do DBT, we do
Yeah.
EMR, and you go like, so what does that mean in English? Because that's the way. If you look at, I would say 90% of all treatment centers, residential, advertise that way. In the new book I have coming out, which is really this guidebook, I teach families what to look for in treatment, centers. But like, they need to know, tell me about, and also, what's your population you're used to doing? What do you do this really well with that 20-year-old? How many 20-year-olds do you have? If you have someone that is 65 or 70, and you say to this treatment center X, hey, tell me what your current population is. Well, we have 25, 20 to 18 to 24-year-olds. Well, that may not be the right place. If there's a mix, because obviously, someone who's older might be like me. I love younger people. Don't just put me with everybody who's 70. I'm not going to be happy, because I was on a college campus most of my life.
Right.
But I'm not going to be the only one there that's in my 70s. It's not going to work.
Right.
50s, 40s, that there's a cross-generational mix for something. So you have to also look at that.
I think the other thing too is it's talking to, like you said earlier, talking to an interventionist and getting 3 recommendations. So it's not just looking at a website. It's not just looking at reviews, because when you look at reviews, typically the people that write reviews are the people that had a bad experience. I mean,
let's
and
also checking out what's the background of your interventionist. Obviously, CIP is the only certification. There are 2 intervention groups. One is NII, Network of Independent Interventionists. The other is AIS, Association of Independent Interventionists or Intervention Specialists. And interviewing, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. Everyone's going to have possibly a different kind of thing. If someone's a licensed clinician, like myself, they're able to do a more robust biopsychosocial. It's because we're clinically trained that way. But it may be that other person is just who you need. It's not to say one's better than the other, but check them out. Check out their recommendations. Check out how long have they been in business. And what do they do? How long is their engagement? Are they here today, gone tomorrow? I mean, I have an exceptionally long engagement, so do some other people. What is their skill level? And you'll know. because you're going to join up with them, because you're going to trust them or trust their teammate, for doing that. But they're different. And, I think that, and references, it may be, Tim, that you say, well, I know 3 really good people, and these are 3 people you can check out. And so that's coming from you. Most of my referrals come from somewhere else.
Right.
They're not coming from the web.
Right. Well, I think we're about out of time here. Dr. Louise Stanger, I so appreciate you. Do you want to share with everybody how they can find you and how they can find out more about you? And you mentioned your Soup to Nuts article. We need to get that in the comments below. So anybody that wants to read that article, we can give you comments below. And if somebody on here is listening, if you can make a comment to remind us, we will leave that in the comments below. How can people find you?
So it's really easy. I'm my own personal assistant. Hi, 619-507-1699. And so I always answer my phone unless I'm with another family, and I'll always call you back. My website is www.allaboutinterventions.com, or you can Google Dr. Louise Stanger and reach me. I have a little chat box that I always respond to. There's no robot or anybody that does that. I do have a beautiful team that works with me. That I'm really proud to collaborate with. And I love, my job at this stage of my life is to help you help yourself. And if I'm not the right person or not the right team, I will for sure refer you to someone that is, because I think that I've been around long enough, know what good treatment is, know who other good professionals are in the field. And really, my goal is to help you achieve the best possible outcome for yourself and for your loved one.
Who is your ideal client? Like, who is the person that should call you?
Oh my goodness, I'm working with so many different people right now. The mother who's worried about their 40-year-old daughter or 40-year-old son, the parent who's worried about their 16 or 17-year-old oppositionally on the spectrum child, the parent who's worried about their college-age student that just flunked out, or master's degree student, the older adult, because I am an older adult, I can relate well to that. I think that I do really well with mental health, the person that has chronic pain and the family who has chronic pain. I think that is something that I am excellent in, because I did develop a chronic pain family program, and really feel comfortable because there's a different way into them. I'm open to all possibility. I will turn away some clients because I don't think I'm a good match. I seem to work well with professionals like lawyers, Indian chiefs, pilots, businessmen, but at the same time, I work well with just the regular person. It really depends on how we join up. I don't necessarily do under 18, except in every exception. That's not a wheelhouse for me. I also don't do a lot of primary disordered eating. It's not a wheelhouse there's too many. There's other good people out there that will do that. And so I would say those are 2 that I tend to shy away from unless it's really important.
Awesome. Dr. Louise Stanger, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy.
Thank you. Take good care.